Dear learners, in the course on the sociology of religion, in the first unit, we started with the understanding of the sociological base of religion. Initially, we discussed the sociological background of religion, where we saw the elements or components of religion and what was the structure and function of religion. Then we saw the theoretical background of religion, followed by religion in primitive society. The relationship and link between religion, magic and science were also deliberated. As a social institution, religion has a vital role in the economy and power structure. The bond between the three institutions, religion, economy and politics, was discussed with the support of the works of several philosophers and theorists, particularly Weber. Protestant ethics, which was drawn from the religious sect and its influence on the economy, specifically capitalism, is also discussed in the unit. Now, in this model, we are going to discuss the spirit of separatism in the milieu of Protestant ethics. Then we will be seeing what is this separatism and separatism movements. The idea of separating religion from state will be discussed as a concept of secularism, the spirit of separatism in the milieu of Protestant ethics. According to Martin, in the Encyclopedia of Religion, Protestantism is a global movement that originated from reforms of Western Christianity in the 16th century. It is a movement that consists of a variety of church organizations as well as a less well defined ethos, spirit and cultural achievement. As a result, it is common to refer to Reformed or Methodist congregations as Protestant, just as it is to refer to us Protestant nation or a Protestant ethic. Several efforts were made to define the definitional parameters of Protestantism have been made over the years as a result of various demands. For instance, some Anglicans or Church of England members who emphasize how closely they are associated with the historic Catholic tradition frequently dislike the idea of being categorized as Protestant at all. On Lutheran territory, the name Protestant was first used in 1529. The initial reformations led by Luther were radically democratic. By limiting the authority of both the church and the state, he aimed to advance the interests of the general public. He encouraged the separation of church and state. As a result, he requested secular powers assistance where the church was put at the service of the state. The church's authority, wealth and institutions came into the control of kings, princes and town magistrates as well as its power and money. Likewise, John Calvin of Geneva advocated for the complete separation of political and ecclesiastical authority, although he subsequently realized that doing so would undermine the popularity of his teachings, which forms the base for Calvinism. David Barrett attempts to bring some order to the definitional chaos in his world Christian Encyclopedia by grouping the non-Roman Catholic and non-Orthodox Christians into 5 families or blocks, which he refers to as Protestant, non-white indigenous, Anglican, marginal Protestant and Catholic non-Roman. Northern Hemisphere churches like the Congregationalists and Baptists are included in the mainstream Protestant category along with Lutheran, Anglican and the like. Protestantism as a whole is beginning of a new era because of the transfer of power to indigenous non-white forms after more than 450 years. This older Protestantism underwent significant expansion at the turn of the 19th century through missionary efforts to convert people in every country, particularly the colonies, and found churches everywhere. In the past, the Protestantism of Europe was founded on thought patterns that be contingent on and connected to earlier Catholic ideologies. Old and new Protestantism have both historically been seen as being diverse. According to Barrett, there are 20,780 different Christian denominations among the 1 billion or more practicing Christians worldwide. Separatists, also known as independents, were English Protestants in the 16th and 17th centuries who desired to leave the Church of England because they believed it had become corrupt and found their own local churches. During the Commonwealth, that is between the period of 1649 to 60, and under the leadership of the separatist Lord Protector Oliver Cromwell, separatists had the most political sway in England. After surviving oppression, they eventually rose to prominence as a religious minority in England. One of the separatists' core idea or beliefs was the idea that the gathered church was formed by the Holy Spirit rather than by man or the state. Separatists emphasized the right and responsibility of each congregation to manage its own affairs without having to submit such decisions to the judgment of any higher human authority. Separatists believed that sincere Christian believers should seek not other Christians and together create their churches. That idea contrasted with the territorial structure of the Church of England, where everyone in a particular area belonged to the parish church and each local parish was subject to the control of the higher church hierarchy. At first, the separatist movement was outlawed in England and many of its supporters faced repression from both the government and church. Many separatists left England for more accepting nations after being frequently called traitors. One of these groups made its way from England to Holland in 1608, some of them in Plymouth, Massachusetts in 1620. Together by Puritans and Plymouth separatists helped found the Massachusetts Bay Colony in 1630. The New England, the Puritans, embraced the congregational form of church government created by the Pilgrims despite their initial desire to purify and reform the Church of England. As a result, the separatists and Puritan churches evolved in the Congregationalists of the United States. The American Revolution significantly accelerated this tendency toward separation of church and state. The Thomas Jefferson wrote Virginia's Act for establishing religious freedom in 1786, which reaffirmed the neutrality of the state in the issues of faith. The idealization of religious tolerance and even the separation of the institutions of church and state by Enlightenment intellectuals did not actually materialize, let alone in practice. Separatists contended that a high wall of separation between church and state is necessary and that any support for religion on the part of the government is unlawful. Now we can see what is the concept of separatism mean and the separatism movement. Separatism is the concept that justifies the termination of political and legal ties of a group with other groups in the name of or with the idea of racial, ethnic, cultural, religious, political and linguistic differences in the presence of a history of oppression, exclusion, persecution and discrimination which can serve as justifications for the group to terminate. Separatism is a set of beliefs or practices that sustains either the autonomy or independence of a group or geographical entity from a state or a country, governmental institutions or a larger group by advocating separation. In most cases, the termination's ultimate goal is the establishment or restoration of power over a particular territory in order to establish or restore sovereign control. Separatist claims are frequently the ignition for uprising and revolutions because they are accompanied by strong emotions of hatred, anger, hurt and humiliation. Separatists base their claims on a desire to create an unbreakable social barrier and distance between themselves and the people, state or region that they are angry and against which they have disputes. One of the main areas of study in the social sciences is the intricate relationship between the level of separatism and its objectives and drivers on a global scale as well as inside specific states. Among the disciplines that have systematically examined this issue are political science, sociology, anthropology, social psychology and geography. Now we can see, is there any classification between separatism and see the types of separatism. In the book The Welly-Blackwell Encyclopedia of Race, Ethnicity and Nationalism, Dennis M. and Dennis N. explains the motivation for separatism may come from a dominant group's desire to separate itself from minorities in order to preserve its way of life, or vice versa, from a minority group's desire to separate itself from the larger dominant group's domination. They further stated that separatism can be external or internal based on the nature of separation. Now we can see what is this external separatism. The roots of external separatism are based on the historical expansion of nation states. Nation states annex vast territories that contain a variety of people, religions and cultures as they grow and rise to the status of imperial powers. Reviewing ancient empires like Roman and Holy Romans as well as modern empires like the Ottoman, Russian, Austrian, Spanish, Portuguese, French and British, from which modern nation states in Europe, Asia, Africa and the Middle East originated, reveals the process of external separatism. Usually, the imperial or colonial power is an outside force occupying from far away. The mother country or the political and economic heart of the imperial power is where the attraction of authority is concentrated, rather than in the territory or population that is being invaded. The conquered people's need to reaffirm or maintain devotion to the myths and symbols of their past, whether true or imagined, and to support a claim for their pre-conquest independence is therefore what is meant by the external separatist urge. The goal of external separatism is to disentangle and remove the intricate external web of control that colonial or imperial powers have enmeshed a far off population. Now we can see the second type, that is internal separatism. Internal separatism is the separatist drive that exists within groups that share a common landmass, even though they may reside in a distinctive, identifiable, well-known area of the nation state or civilization and have a strong cultural connection to the land that is deeply rooted in their stories, myths and history. Separatism, which is internal in nature, usually swings between harmony and conflict among the various groups that have differences. The factors that lead to internal separatism are usually differences in language, culture, or religion. The compulsion that causes separatism is dominance. The non-dominant or smaller groups long for power but are the victim of domination and discrimination, and they are collectively oppressed, suppressed, and persecuted. In the war or the negotiation made by the internal separatists for freedom, there were several dilemmas that often makes the movement more successful. Some of the successful internal separatist movements are South Sudan, Eritrea, and East Timor. This internal separatist fight could eventually lead to separation, which can be full or partial separation from an existing nation state. The Kurdish region of Iraq, Kashmir, Tibet, the Basque provinces, Kosovo in the drastically shrunken Yugoslavia, the Spanish Sahara, Catalonia, and the intermediate status of Quebec are all included in this category. Ryabinin, in his article The Basic Causes of the Contemporary Separatism, discussed the classification of separatism as follows. Separatism can be based on different integral parts like cultural, religious, economic, ideological, ethnic, and civilizational. On the basis of the degree of activity, separatism is classified as active, moderate, and passive separatism. When the idea of separation is supported actively by the group, then it is active separatism. The claim of ethnic group is only self-sufficiency and independent status, then it is characterized as moderate separatism. Whereas there exists dissatisfaction regarding the status in the nation, but it is not neither claimed nor demanded, then it is passive separatism. The author further stated that separatism can also be open or closed. Further, based on intensity, scholars distinguish between active and latent separatism, which can be peaceful. Active separatism can be peaceful in the form of petitions, disobedience of national laws, formation of separatist movements, rallies, or demonstration. Further, in active separatism, it can be violent also. How? It can be through destruction of property, beatings, riots, guerrilla attacks, terrorist attacks, and civil wars. In contrast, in latent separatism, that it takes place in the form of beliefs, attitudes, narratives, ideologies, as well as collective memories of a past autonomous or independent status. The scope and the character of separatist demand have an impact on how intensely it is practiced. The low end of the range is the scale or request made at the group or community level. This claim does not necessitate alerting the constitutions or other legal pillars of the nation state, while the demand is for a larger portion of economic income or for improving the standing of their culture and way of life. For instance, tribal separatism in United States, provisional separatism in Europe, China and Russia, the Russian Federation and sectarian dissonance, example, Nation of Islam in the United States, old believers in the Russian Orthodox Church are all form its base in this type of separatism. At the next end of the scale, sectarian refers to separating from the main branch of the group's primary religion. Dissidence refers to these groups' efforts to stand apart significantly from both society and the state. Now we can see the complexity of separatism. Separatism is a multifaceted phenomenon, and now we can throw light on its complexity. International Encyclopedia of Social Sciences discusses the complexity of separatism, we can deliberate about it by taking the insights from that text. Most separatists' beliefs or movements are intricate mesh-ups of political, racial, ethnic, religious and economic secession. The occurrence of separatism in its pure form is very rare. Political separatism entails disagreement about how political systems and the constituent institutions that control them are created and governed. Political beliefs that are mobilized are dominant and crucial. This was the case with separatist movements led by monarchist, socialist and liberal democratic ideologies that took control on provisional governments. For instance, in the case of Russia, formed as the Soviet Union in November 1917, the contest of the Bolshevik Revolution, where the leftist revolutionaries launched a coup against the then provisional government, anti-communism was a key component of the separatist movement that later sparked the Soviet Union's collapse. The latter made it possible for nationalist and pro-democracy movements to unite when there would have been no other justification for doing. Boris Yeltsin, the first elected president of Russia, organized a separatist movement that was decidedly anti-Soviet and called for breaking away from organizations like Communist Party, the KGB, the Soviet Union's Security and Intelligence Service, and the State Planning Organization. This is the case with the political separatist movement, where the component of nationalism is always intertwined. Whereas, in the case of ethnic, racial and religious separatism, the claim or the demand for which the separatists raised was status, autonomy or independence of the group to which they belong, whether it is ethnic, racial or religious. The ethical and racial movements demand cultural and linguistic distinctiveness and privilege. Quebec in Canada, the Basque Country in Spain, Corsica are examples for this. In the Indian context, the seven sister hills states of northeastern region, they are Meghalaya, Manipur, Nagaland, Assam, Mizoram, Tripura and Sikkim, and the Himalayan state of Arunachal Pradesh are the areas in India where ethnic separatism has persisted since independence, though it is currently waning. Religious separatism movements appear both within and across major religions. Catholic Protestant war in Northern Ireland, Shia and Sunni conflict in Iraq, Islam Christian divisions in Bosnia, Hindu Muslim dispute over Kashmir are some examples. Sikh separatism was also an example on both ethnic and religious separatism, which was a movement in India for an independent Sikh homeland, Khalistan in Punjab. However, when economic interests predominate, separatist movements are more likely to result in deals with central authorities rather than state disintegration. The slogan of the American colonists seeking independence from the British Empire, "No taxation without representation," is a good example for economic separatism. Now we can see the factors that influence separatist movements. Three factors have been identified by the social science research as the driving force behind separatist movements. They are the structural conditions, which includes macroeconomic performance and intergroup differentials, demographic trends and distribution of ethnic populations, polity type, ethnofederalism, geography and terrain. The second one is behavioral micro foundations, which includes intergroup bias, frustration, aggression, psychology, cognitive processes, emotions. And the third and the final one is interactivity, that is the bargaining or games within and outside of the movement. The relative importance of these characteristics is the main topic of discussion both within and beyond disciplines of social sciences. Now we can move on to the next idea of this presentation, that is secularism, the idea of separating religion from the state. Till this point, we have discussed separatism as a movement where the separatists claim their own territory and control and authority. As a movement, separatism can be political, cultural, ethnic, linguistic or religious, etc. But at the advent of the idea of nation state, a democratic form of government, the idea of separating religion from state cropped in, and it is termed as secularism. Though religion is viewed from the dichotomy of sacred and profane by Durkheim, the new term secular comes in, which means being separate from religion or having no religious basis. Secularism as a perspective separates religion from the public space, that is political, economic, social and cultural aspects of life, with religion being treated as a purely personal matter. The very idea of secularism is to provide equal opportunities for followers of all religions. This equal opportunity stops discrimination and partiality on the grounds of religion. The core idea of secularism is related to religion. Secularism in culture implies that the dominance of one religion over another does not result in prejudice or persecution of other religions which are minorities numerically. While defining secularism, it depends on how closely religion is connected to the characteristics and attributes, that is, the relationship with the state and other institutions, faith, religious communities, place of the individual, democratic values like freedom and equality regarding religion and ethical values. In a sense, secularism may advocate the right to be free from religious authority and teachings, as well as freedom from government forcing its faith on the populace. The state is not only neutral to people's religious convictions, but also does not grant any special advantages or financial support to any religion, whereas in another sense it indicates the idea that human actions and decisions, particularly those that are political, need to be scientific and empirical based on facts and evidence that are free from religious bias. The debate on secularism is diverse and has varied justifications. Western and European countries argue secularism is a movement away from traditional religious beliefs and towards modernity. From the view of Subban, in his work on concept of secularism, we can have a detailed discussion on the concept of secularism, where secularism is seen as the wall of separation between the church and the state. The government's stand on secularity and the freedom to exercise any religion are the primary aspects of secularism. John Locke, an English philosopher, is frequently attributed to having developed the idea of church and state separation. In the social contract theory, Locke argued that in the realm of individual conscience, the government could not control because coherent people could not give up control of their integrity to the government or others. Along with Locke's social contract, these ideas about religious tolerance and the value of personal conscience had a significant impact on the American colonies and plays a significant role in the formulation of the Constitution of the United States. As we have seen or discussed earlier, some of the nation states are characterized by the principle of constitutionally secular. The countries that come under this category include France, India, Mexico, South Korea and Turkey. Although none of these countries have a similar or identical form of government structure. Subban, further in his discussion, dealt with two common examples of the most active type of separation of religion from state, that is France and Turkey. The French version of separation is called laïcité. This model of secularist state protects the religious institutions from some types of state interference, but public religious expression is also to some extent limited. This aims to protect public power from the influences of religious institutions, especially in public office. Turkey, whose population is overwhelmingly Muslim, is also considered to have practiced the laïcite school of secularism since 1923. While France comes from a Roman Catholic tradition and Turkey from an Islamic tradition. Secularism in Turkey and secularism in France present many similarities. Now we can see secularism in the Indian context. The secular characteristics of India can be found in its constitution itself. The preamble to the Constitution of India signifies that India is a secular state. Man, state and religion are the three interlinking entities of the concept of secularism. Initially, in 1950, the word secular has not been defined or explained under the Constitution of India, but in later 1976, it was made part of the preamble. A secular state means one that protects all religions equally and does not uphold any religion as the state religion. Regarding all religions, the state maintains a neutral and impartial stance. It is considered that the secular state, whatsoever it is designed and constructed, will at the very least have to deal with and address each demand for equality, liberty and neutrality. It is assumed that the secular state, whomsoever constructed, will minimally have to contend with and respond to each of these demands of equality, liberty and neutrality. The liberal argument is that without a model of secularism that reflects the normative forces of liberty, equality and neutrality, it is impossible for diverse religious communities to exist in harmony within the same democratic polity. To put it in other ways, everyone should be free to practice whichever religion they choose, to live by its precepts and to reject all others without the government interfering. The preamble of the Indian Constitution recognized religious freedom as the core foundation of liberty. Secularism is a fundamental principle and the very basis of modern governance. Hence, it should be present in particularly every constitution of a developing country. The idea of secularism is considered a fundamental component of a contemporary law, and the existence of theocratic states is extremely rare and relatively few. India is undoubtedly a secular country, but due to recent events and the intermittent occurrences of communal fury, it is undoubtedly facing numerous challenges to its concept of secularism in the modern era. Principally, secularism works in many differently in different societies. Challenges related to it in the form of fundamentalism and communalism are inevitable, but secularism provides the palliative framework for resolving differences justly and safely. Secular states are not atheist states, they are different models of secularism followed by different nations as per their wants and needs. We are in the last portion of the presentation. We can sum up. In this module, we had a discussion in three parts. First was the continuation of Protestant ethics and how the ethics of Protestantism impact on or influence the spirit of separatism. The rise of the Protestant church and its way to separate religion from the state was discussed. Then, secondly, we saw separatism as the concept and its types with relevant illustrations from separatist movements around the world. Finally, secularism, which literally separates religion and states and their interference with each other, was discussed. Its different models were dealt with, and the session ended with the secularism of India and the challenges awaiting before it. Thank you.